Hello, welcome to Emerald Lake. Hello, welcome to Emerald Lake. I'm going to try reading again. Every time I've tried to start back up, there's been some technical difficulties. So we're going to try again. Let's see if this works. I'm going to do some of the triggers listed, and then I'm going to break to see if there's been the same issues that I've dealt with previously. First up, I'm going to do brushing. And now I'm going to do some scissor snips. And a couple of comb twinks. And like I said I would, I'm going to break to listen back and see if things are still running smoothly. Well, so far so good. So I'm going to pick up in Snow White where I left off. And let's hope that this is better. Snow White, we were at the moment when the Queen has asked the mirror, and the mirror has spoken that Snow is not dead. And so she thought and thought again how she might kill her, for so long as she was not the fairest in the world. Envy let her have no rest, and when she had at last thought of something to do, she painted her face and dressed herself like an old peddler woman. And no one could have known her. In this disguise she went over the 7 mountains to the 7 dwarves, and knocked at the door and cried, "Pretty things to sell, very cheap, very cheap." Little Snow White looked out the window and called out, "Good day, my good woman, what have you to sell?" "Good things, pretty things," she answered. "Stay laces of all colors." And she pulled out one which was woven of bright colored silk. "I may let the worthy old woman in," thought Snow White. And she unbolted the door and bought the pretty laces. "Child," said the old woman, "what a fright you look. come, I will lace you properly for once." Snow White had no suspicion, but stood before her and let herself be laced with the new laces. But the old woman laced so quickly and so tightly that Snow White lost her breath and fell down as if dead. "Now I am the most beautiful," said the queen to herself, and ran away. Not long afterwards, in the evening, the 7 dwarfs came home. But how shocked they were when they saw their dear little Snow White lying on the ground, and that she neither stirred nor moved and seemed to be dead. They lifted her up, and as they saw that she was laced too tightly, they cut the laces. Then she began to breathe a little, and after a while came to life again. When the dwarfs heard what had happened, they said, "The old peddler woman was no one else than the wicked queen. Take care, and let no one come in when we are not with you." But the wicked woman, when she had reached home, went in front of the glass and asked, looking glass on the wall, "Who in this land is the fairest of all?" And it answered as before, "O Queen, thou art fairest of all I see, but over the hills where the 7 dwarfs dwell, Snow White is still alive and well, and none is so fair as she." When she heard that, all her blood rushed to her heart with fear, for she saw plainly that little Snow White was again alive. "But now," she said, "I will think of something that shall put an end to you." And by the help of witchcraft, which she understood, she made a poisonous comb. Then she disguised herself and took the shape of another old woman. So she went to the 7 mountains, to the 7 dwarfs, knocked at the door and cried, "Good things to sell, cheap, cheap." Little Snow White looked out and said, "Go away, I cannot let anyone come in." "I suppose you can look," said the old woman, and pulled the poisonous comb out and held it up. It pleased the girl so well that she let herself be beguiled and opened the door. When they had made a bargain, the old woman said, "Now I will comb you properly for once." Poor little Snow White had no suspicion, and let the old woman do as she pleased, but hardly had she put the comb in her hair than the poison in it took effect, and the girl fell down senseless. "You paragon of beauty," said the wicked woman, "you are done for now," and she went away. But fortunately it was almost evening when the 7 dwarfs came home. When they saw Snow White laying as if dead upon the ground, they at once suspected the stepmother, and they looked and found the poisonous comb. Scarcely had they taken it out when Snow White came to herself and told them what had happened. They warned her once more to be upon her guard and to open the door to no one. The queen, at home, went in front of the glass and said, looking glass on the wall, "Who in this land is the fairest of all?" Then it answered as before, "O Queen, thou art fairest of all I see, but over the hills where the 7 dwarfs dwell, Snow White is still alive and well, and none is so fair as she." When she heard the glass speak thus, she trembled and shook with rage. "Snow White shall die," she cried, "even if it costs me my life." Thereupon she went into a secret, lonely room where no one ever came, and there she made a very poisonous apple. Outside it looked pretty, white with a red cheek, so that everyone who saw it longed for it, but whoever ate a piece of it must surely die. When the apple was ready, she painted her face and dressed herself up as a country woman, and so she went over the 7 mountains to the 7 dwarfs. She knocked at the door. Snow White put her head out of the window and said, "I cannot let anyone in. The 7 dwarfs have forbidden me." "It is all the same to me," answered the woman. "I shall soon get rid of my apples. There, I will give you one." "No," said Snow White, "I dare not take anything." "Are you afraid of poison?" said the old woman. "Look, I will cut the apple in 2 pieces. You eat the red cheek, and I will eat the white." The apple was so cunningly made that only the red cheek was poisoned. Snow White longed for the fine apple, and when she saw that the woman ate part of it, she could resist no longer, and stretched out her hand and took the poisonous half. But hardly had she bit of it in her mouth than she fell down dead. Then the queen looked at her with a dreadful look, and laughed out loud, and said, "White as snow, red as blood, black as ebony wood. This time the dwarfs cannot wake you up again." And when she looked at the looking-glass at home, looking glass on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all? It answered at last, "O Queen, in this land thou art fairest of all." Then her envious heart had rest, so far as an envious heart can have rest. The dwarfs, when they came home in the evening, found Snow White lying upon the ground. She breathed no longer and was dead. They lifted her up, looked to see whether they could find anything poisonous, unlaced her, combed her hair, washed her with water and wine, but it was all of no use. The poor child was dead and remained dead. They laid her upon a bier, and all 7 of them sat round it and wept for her, and wept 3 days long. Then they were going to bury her, but she looked as if she were living, and still had her pretty red cheeks. They said, "We could not bury her in the dark ground," and they had a transparent coffin of glass made, so that she could be seen from all sides, and they laid her in it, and wrote her name upon it in golden letters, and that she was a king's daughter. Then they put the coffin up upon the mountain, and one of them always stayed by it and watched it. And birds came too and wept for Snow White, first an owl, then a raven, and last a dove. And now Snow White lay a long, long time in the coffin, and she did not change, but she looked as if she were asleep, for she was as white as snow, as red as blood, and her hair was as black as ebony. It happened, however, that a king's son came into the forest and went to the dwarf's house to spend the night. He saw the coffin on the mountain, and the beautiful Snow White within it, and read what was written upon it in gold letters. Then he said to the dwarfs, "Let me have the coffin. I will give you whatever you want for it." But the dwarfs answered, "We will not part with it for all the gold in the world." Then he said, "Let me have it as a gift, for I cannot live without seeing Snow White. I will honor and prize her as my dearest possession." As he spoke in this way, the good dwarves did pity upon him, and they gave him the coffin. And now the king's son had it carried away by his servants on their shoulders, and it happened that they stumbled over a tree stump, and with the shock, the poisonous piece of apple which Snow White had bitten off came out of her throat, and before long she opened her eyes, lifted up the lid of the coffin, sat up, and was once more alive. "Oh heavens, where am I?" she cried. The king's son, full of joy, said, "You are with me," and told her what had happened, and said, "I love you more than everything in the world. Come with me to my father's palace. You shall be my wife." And Snow White was willing and went with him, and their wedding was held with great show and splendor. But Snow White's wicked stepmother was also bidden to the feast. When she had arrayed herself in beautiful clothes, she went to the looking-glass and said, looking glass on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all?" The glass answered, "O Queen, of all here the fairest art thou, but the young queen is fairer by far, as I trow." Then the wicked woman uttered a curse, and was so wretched, so utterly wretched, that she knew not what to do. At first she would not go to the wedding at all, but she had no peace, and must go to see the young queen. And when she went in, she knew Snow White, and she stood still with rage and fear, and could not stir. But iron slippers had already been put upon the fire, and they were brought in with tongs and set before her. Then she was forced to put on the red-hot shoes and dance until she dropped down dead. And that was Snow White. I'm going to move to a couple more triggers. If there's any requests, please put them in the chat. I'm going to start with sticks. And now I will move to glass tapping. I'll do the tin and plastic jar. Finally, before my next story, I'm going to readjust myself, and I'll be opening a can of zero soda. So you'll get bubbles. I didn't put this on my list there, mostly because I won't be able to reopen another can if someone requested it, but also because I won't be able to do it always. But here we go. And I am still learning how far away that should be from the mic. Further. Okay. Bubbles. For my first proper stream, I saved the can for once things were more stable, so cheers to this working better. Now I'll head into the next story. If you have a preference, I am picking stories from World of Tales right now. It would be European fairy tales. And I am about to pick between Alright. Either Little Red Riding Hood or The Ugly Duckling. If you'd like to tell me what you'd prefer, drop that in the chat. Ugly Duckling or Little Red Riding Hood. I'm going to take just a moment to adjust myself and then I'll get started. If you haven't responded by the time I got back, then I will pick. Alright, since I got no votes, I decided I'd go with the Ugly Duckling, and I put that up so that other people can see it. Now, this is longer than I expected it to be. I'll likely take a break a while in, but I will try to go straight for it. It was so beautiful in the country. It was the summertime. The wheat fields were golden, the oats were green, and the hay stood in great stacks in the green meadows. The stork paraded about among them on his long red legs, chattering away in Egyptian, the language he had learned from his lady mother. All around the meadows and cornfields grew thick woods, and in the midst of the forest was a deep lake. Yes, it was beautiful. It was delightful in the country. In a sunny spot stood a pleasant old farmhouse, circled all about with deep canals, and from the walls down to the water's edge grew great burdocks, so high that under the tallest of them a little child might stand upright. The spot was as wild as if it had been in the very center of a thick wood. In this snug retreat sat a duck upon her nest, watching for her young brood to hatch. But the pleasure she had felt at first was almost gone. She had begun to think it was a wearisome task, for the little ones were so long coming out of their shells, and she seldom had visitors. The other ducks liked so much better to swim about in the canals than to climb the slippery banks and sit under the burdock leaves to have a gossip with her. It was a long time to stay so much by herself. At length, however, one shell cracked, and soon another, and from each came a living creature that lifted its head and cried, "Peep, peep." "Quack, quack," said the mother, and then they all tried to say it too, as well as they could, while they looked all about them on every side at the tall green leaves. Their mother allowed them to look about as much as they liked, because the green is good for the eyes. "What a great world it is, to be sure," said the little ones, when they found how much more room they had than when they were in the eggshell. "Is this all the world, do you imagine?" said the mother. "Wait till you have seen the garden. Far beyond that it stretches down to the pastor's field, though I have never ventured to such a distance. Are you all out?" she continued, rising to look. "No, not all. The largest egg lies there yet, I declare. I wonder how long this business is to last. I'm really beginning to be tired of it." But for all that she sat down again. "Well, and how are you today?" quacked an old duck who came to pay her a visit. "There's one egg that takes a deal of hatching. The shell is hard and will not break," said the fond mother, who sat still upon her nest. "But just look at the others. Have I not a pretty family? And they not the prettiest little ducklings you ever saw? They are the image of their father, the good-for-naught. He never comes to see me." "Let me see the egg that will not break," said the old duck. "I have no doubt it's a guinea fowl's egg. The same thing happened to me once, and a deal of trouble it gave me, for the young ones are afraid of the water. I quacked and clucked, but all to no purpose. Let me take a look at it. Yes, I am right. It's a guinea fowl, upon my word, so take my advice and leave it where it is. Come to the water and teach the other children to swim." "I think I will sit a little while longer," said the mother. "I have sat so long, a day or two more won't matter." "Very well, please yourself," said the old duck, rising, and she went away. At last the great egg broke, and the latest bird cried "peep, peep" as he crept forth from the shell. How big and ugly he was! The mother duck stared at him and did not know what to think. "Really," she said, "this is an enormous duckling, and it is not at all like any of the others. I wonder if he will turn out to be a guinea fowl." Well, we shall see when we get to the water, for into the water he must go, even if I have to push him in myself. On the next day the weather was delightful. The sun shone brightly on the green burdock leaves, and the mother duck took her whole family down to the water and jumped in with a splash. "Quack, quack!" cried she, and one after another the little ducklings jumped in. The water closed over their heads, but they came up again in an instant and swam about quite prettily with their legs paddling under them as easily as possible. Their legs went of their own accord, and the ugly gray coat was also in the water, swimming with them. "Oh," said the mother, "that is not a guinea fowl. See how well he uses his legs, and how erect he holds himself. He is my own child, and he is not so very ugly after all, if you look at him properly. Quack, quack, come with me now. I will take you into grand society and introduce you to the farmyard, but you must keep close to me, or you may be trodden upon, and above all, beware of the cat." When they reached the farmyard, there was a wretched riot going on. 2 families were fighting for an eel's head, which, after all, was carried off by the cat. "See, children, that is the way of the world," said the mother duck, wetting her beak, for she would have liked the eel's head herself. "Come now, use your legs and let me see how well you can behave. You must bow your heads prettily to that old duck yonder. She is the highest born of them all and has Spanish blood, therefore she is well off. Don't you see, she has a red rag tied to her leg, which is something very grand and a great honor for a duck. It shows that everyone is anxious not to lose her, and that she is to be noticed by both man and beast. Come now, don't turn in your toes. A well-bred duckling spreads his feet wide apart, just like his father and mother, in this way. Now bend your necks and say quack." I'll take a break there to answer. Yes, I'm very new. Thank you for saying something in the chat. I will be chatting more in between stories, just because I don't know exactly what I should do if people want to chat with me while I am reading. I should probably figure that out for a proper way that says, okay, I'll stop the reading for a second. But I am still sorting it out. Let me know if you have any objections to me continuing to read The Ugly Duckling. The ducklings did as they were bade, but the other ducks started and said, "Look, here comes another brood," as if they were not enough of us already. And bless me, what a queer-looking object one of them is. We don't want him here. And then one flew out and bit him in the neck. "Let him alone," said the mother. "He is not doing any harm." "Yes, but he is so big and ugly. He's a perfect fright," said the spiteful duck, "and therefore he must be turned out. A little biting will do him good." "The others are very pretty children," said the old duck with the rag on her leg. "All but that one. I wish his mother would smooth him up a bit. He is really ill-favored." "That is impossible, your grace," said the mother. "He is not pretty, but he has a very good disposition, and swims as well as the others, or even better. I think he will grow up pretty, and perhaps be smaller. He has remained too long in the egg, and therefore his figure is not properly formed." And then she stroked his neck and smoothed his feathers, saying, "It is a drake, and therefore not of so much consequence. I think he will grow up strong and able to take care of himself." "The other ducklings are graceful enough," said the old duck. "Now make yourself at home, and if you find an eel's head, you can bring it to me." And so they made themselves comfortable. But the poor duckling, who had crept out of his shell last of all, and looked so ugly, was bitten and pushed and made fun of, not only by the ducks, but by all the poultry. "He is too big," they all said, and the turkey cock, who had been born into the world with spurs, and fancied himself really an emperor, puffed himself out like a vessel in full sail and flew at the duckling. He became quite red in the head with passion, so that the poor little thing did not know where to go, and was quite miserable because he was so ugly as to be laughed at by the whole farmyard. So it went on from day to day. It got worse and worse. The poor duckling was driven about by everyone. Even his brothers and sisters were unkind to him and would say, "Ah, you ugly creature, I wish the cat would get you." And his mother had been heard to say she wished she had he had never been born. The ducks pecked him, the chickens beat him, the girl who fed the poultry pushed him with her feet. So at last he ran away, frightening the little birds in the hedge as he flew over the palings. "They are afraid because I am so ugly," he said. So he flew still farther, until he came out on a large moor, inhabited by wild ducks. Here he remained the whole night, feeling very sorrowful. In the morning, when the wild ducks rose in the air, they stared at their new comrade. "What sort of duck are you?" they all said, coming round him. He bowed to them and was as polite as he could be, but he did not reply to their question. "You are exceedingly ugly," said the wild ducks, "but that will not matter if you do not want to marry one of our family." Poor thing, he had no thoughts of marriage. All he wanted was permission to lie among the rushes and drink some of the water on the moor. After he had been on the moor 2 days, there came 2 wild geese, rather goslings, for they had not been out of their egg long, which accounts for their impertinence. "Listen, friend," said one of them to the duckling, "you are so ugly that we like you very well. Will you go with us and become a bird of passage? Not far from here is another moor, in which there are some wild geese, all of them unmarried. It is a chance for you to get a wife. You may make your fortune, ugly as you are." Bang, bang sounded in the air, and the 2 wild geese fell dead among the rushes, and the water was twinged with blood. Bang, bang echoed far and wide in the distance, and whole flocks of geese rose up from the rushes. The sound continued from every direction, for the sportsmen surrounded the moor, and some were even seated on the branches of trees, looking over the rushes. The blue smoke from the guns rose like clouds over the dark trees. As it floated away across the water, a number of sporting dogs bounded in among the rushes, which bent beneath them wherever they went. How they terrified the poor duckling! He turned away his head to hide it under his wing, and at the same moment a large, terrible dog passed quite near him. His jaws were open, his tongue hung from his mouth, and his eyes glared fearfully. He thrust his nose close to the duckling, showing his sharp teeth, and then, splash, splash, he went into the water without touching him. "Oh," sighed the duckling, "how thankful I am for being so ugly. Even a dog will not bite me." And so he lay quite still, while the shot rattled through the rushes, and gun after gun was fired over him. It was late in the day before all became quiet, but even then the poor young thing did not dare to move. He waited quietly for several hours, and then, after looking carefully around him, hastened away from the moor as fast as he could. He ran over field and meadow till the storm arose, and he could hardly struggle against it. Towards evening, he reached a poor little cottage that seemed ready to fall, and only seemed to remain standing because it could not decide on which side to fall first. The storm continued so violent that the duckling could go no farther. He sat down by the cottage, and then he noticed that the door was not quite closed, in consequence of one of the hinges having given away. There was, therefore, a narrow opening near the bottom large enough for him to slip through, which he did very quietly, and got shelter for the night. Here, in this cottage, lived a woman, a cat, and a hen. The cat, whom his mistress called "my little son," was a great favorite. He could raise his back and purr, and could even throw out sparks from his fur if it were stroked the wrong way. The hen had very short legs, so she was called Chicky Short Legs. She laid good eggs, and her mistress loved her as if she had been her own child. In the morning, the strange visitor was discovered. The cat began to purr, and the hen to cluck. "What is this noise about?" said the old woman, looking around the room. But her sight was not very good. Therefore, when she saw the duckling, she thought it must be a fat duck that had strayed from home. "Oh, what a prize!" she exclaimed. "I hope it is not a drake, for then I shall have some duck's eggs. I must wait and see." So the duckling was allowed to remain on trial for 3 weeks, but there were no eggs. Now the cat was the master of the house, and the hen was the mistress, and they always said "we" and "the world," for they believed themselves to be half the world, and by far the better half, too. The duckling thought that others might hold a different opinion on the subject, but the hen would not listen to such doubts. "Can you lay eggs?" she asked. "No." "Then have the goodness to cease talking." "Can you raise your back, or purr, or throw out sparks?" said the cat. "No." "Then you have no right to express an opinion when sensible people are speaking." So the duckling sat in a corner, feeling very low-spirited. But when the sunshine and the fresh air came into the room through the open door, he began to feel such a great longing for a swim that he could not help speaking of it. "What an absurd idea," said the hen. "You have nothing else to do, therefore you have foolish fancies. If you could purr or lay eggs, they would pass away. But it is so delightful to swim about on the water," said the duckling, "and so refreshing to feel it close over your head while you dive down to the bottom." "Delightful indeed. It must be a queer sort of pleasure," said the hen. "Why, you must be crazy," asked the cat. "He is the cleverest animal I know. Ask him how he would like to swim about on the water, or to dive under it. For I will not speak of my own opinion. Ask our mistress, the old woman. There is no one in the world more clever than she is. Do you think she would relish swimming and getting the water close over her head?" "I see you don't understand me," said the duckling. "We don't understand you. Who else can understand you, I wonder? Do you consider yourself more clever than the cat or the old woman? I will say nothing of myself. Don't imagine such nonsense, child, and thank your good fortune that you have been so well received here. Are you not in a warm room and in society from which you may learn something? But you are a chatterer, and your company is not very agreeable. Oh, hello everyone. The what? The rat colony has scurried in. Okay. Hello. I am reading The Ugly Duckling, and if you'd like me to stop, I can do that. And I would chat. Thank you. Thank you, Violet. Hello. Why would I stop? If you wanted to chat with me, I will keep reading unless someone says something in the chat. Okay. The chicken was weirdly rambling at the poor duckling. Somewhere in the middle of that. Okay. "But you are a chatterer, and your company is not very agreeable. Believe me, I speak only for your good. I may tell you unpleasant truths, but that is a proof of my friendship. I advise you therefore to lay eggs and learn to purr as quickly as possible." To summarize for all of our new friends, there's a chicken and a cat in a barn that the ugly duckling has visited, and they're telling the duckling that is a boy that he needs to lay eggs or purr to be of some use in this little barn. "I believe I must go out into the world again," said the duckling. "Yes, do," said the hen. So the duckling left the cottage and soon found water on which it could swim and dive. But he was avoided by all the other animals because of his ugly appearance. Autumn came, and the leaves in the forest turned to orange and gold. Then, as winter approached, the wind caught them as they fell and whirled them into the cold air. The clouds, heavy with hail and snowflakes, hung low in the sky, and the raven stood among the reeds crying, "Croak, croak." It made one shiver with cold to look at him. All this was very sad for the poor little duckling. One evening, just as the sun was setting amid radiant clouds, there came a large flock of beautiful birds out of the bushes. The duckling had never seen any like them before. They were swans, and they curved their graceful necks, while their soft plumage shone with dazzling whiteness. They uttered a singular cry as they spread their glorious wings and flew away from those cold regions to warmer countries across the sea. They mounted higher and higher in the air, and the little ugly duckling had a strange sensation as he watched them. He whirled himself in the water like a wheel, stretched out his neck towards them, and uttered a cry so strange that it frightened even himself. Could he ever forget those beautiful, happy birds? And when at last they were out of his sight, He dived under the water and rose again, almost beside himself with excitement. He knew not the names of those birds, or where they had flown, but he felt towards them as he had never felt towards any other bird in the world. He was not envious of those beautiful creatures. It never occurred to him to wish to be as lovely as they. Poor, ugly creature! How gladly he would have lived even with the ducks, had they only treated him kindly and given him encouragement. The winter grew colder and colder. He was obliged to swim about on the water to keep it from freezing, but every night the space on which he swam became smaller and smaller. At length it froze so hard that the ice in the water crackled as he moved, and the duckling had to paddle with his legs as well as he could to keep the space from closing up. He became exhausted at last and lay still and helpless, frozen fast in the ice. Early in the morning, a peasant who was passing by saw what had happened. He broke the ice in pieces with his wooden shoe and carried the duckling home to his wife. The warmth received the poor little creature, but when the children wanted to play with him, the duckling thought they would do him some harm, so he started up in terror, fluttered into the milk pan, and splashed the milk about the room. The woman then clapped her hands, which frightened him still more. He flew first into the butter cask, then into the meal tub and out again. What a condition he was in! The woman screamed and struck at him with the tongs. The children laughed and screamed and tumbled over each other in their efforts to catch him, but luckily he escaped. The door stood open. The creature could just manage to slip out among the bushes and lie down, quite exhausted, in the newly fallen snow. It would be very sad were I to relate all the misery and privations which the poor little duckling endured during the hard winter. But when it had passed, he found himself lying one morning in a moor against the rushes. He felt the warm sun shining and heard the lark singing and saw that all around was beautiful spring. Then the young bird felt that his wings were strong as he flapped them against his sides and rose high into the air. They bore him onwards until, before he well knew how it had happened, he found himself in a large garden. The apple trees were in full blossom, and the fragrant elders bent their long green branches down to the stream, which wound round a smooth lawn. Everything looked beautiful in the freshness of early spring. From a thicket close by came 3 beautiful white swans, rustling their feathers and swimming lightly over the smooth water. The duckling saw these lovely birds and felt more strangely unhappy than ever. "I will fly to these royal birds," he exclaimed, "and they will kill me because, ugly as I am, I dare to approach them. But it does not matter. Better be killed by them than pecked by the ducks, beaten by the hens, pushed about by the maiden who feeds the poultry, or starved with hunger in the winter." Then he flew to the water and swam towards the beautiful swans. The moment they espied the stranger, they rushed to meet him with outstretched wings. "Kill me," said the poor bird, and he bent his head down to the surface of the water and awaited death. But what did he see in the clear stream below? His own image, no longer a dark gray bird, ugly and disagreeable to look at, but a graceful and beautiful swan. To be born in a duck's nest in a farmyard is of no consequence to a bird if it is hatched from a swan's egg. He now felt glad at having suffered sorrow and trouble because it enabled him to enjoy so much better all the pleasure and happiness around him. For the great swans swam round the newcomer and stroked his neck with their beaks as a welcome. Into the garden presently came some little children and threw bread and cake into the water. "See," cried the youngest, "there is a new one." And the rest were delighted and ran to their father and mother, dancing and clapping their hands and shouting joyously, "There's another swan come, a new one has arrived." Then they threw more bread and cake into the water and said, "The new one is the most beautiful of all. He is so young and pretty." And the old swans bowed their heads before him. Then he felt quite ashamed and hid his head under his wing, for he did not know what to do. He was so happy, yet he was not at all proud. He had been persecuted and despised for his ugliness, and now he heard them say he was the most beautiful of all the birds. Even the elder tree bent down its boughs into the water before him, and the sun shone warm and bright. Then he rustled his feathers, curved his slender neck, and cried joyfully from the depths of his heart, "I never dreamed of such happiness as this while I was the despised ugly duckling." And that's the end of that on where I've been finding my stories. I would like to say hi to all of you that have joined. I'll take down my ugly duckling text because that is irrelevant now. I'm learning things slowly. It's so lovely to see that Violet's brought all the friends. Violet and I met in the forest. You can't see my avatar. You can't see me right now because I've had technical difficulties. But if you look at my image, you can see some of me. Yes, the moral of the story is that birds and apparently cats and some children are very, very shallow, and that it is better to experience awful things, which I have to disagree with. But anyway, at least he was a very grateful swan for his life. Yes, you will help fix. We will have a visit. I will come to your shop. My stream is going much better now. If you look, I don't know if you can see it, but at the top of my chat box, there was for a while just comments on the issues that I was having, but it is sorted, and I'm very grateful for that. I even poured myself some bubbles. You guys missed the opening of the can, but I celebrated with bubbles when everything started to work. Bubbles! So, if you would like to ask for anything, I have some triggers listed there, and I will start doing that, or I will move to my next story plan, and I'm planning to wrap up in maybe an hour. So that's when we'll be done today. But depending on how long the next story will be, it would be yes, the bubbles from Nemo. Bubble, 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 my bubbles. He's a good little thing. We are going to read Red Riding Hood next. So that would be what would go next. Oh, thank you. Death Noah? The bubbles do sound so nice. They sounded so nice when I first opened it. Oh yes, go rest. All of you that were listening to Violets, go rest if you do not want to be awake much longer. Violet yourself. Go rest if you do not want to be awake much longer. I'm going to just take a moment to change that little thing again. It didn't get rid of the words, and I'm annoyed. And please, if you have trigger suggestions, we can do that. But if not, I will go into Little Red Riding Hood. Yes, no worries. Cage Nightwind, go ahead. Oh, yes, toast is nice. Oh, yes. Okay. Oh, hello. Okay. I'm just going to mute long enough to fix this. All right. All right. I see someone said, "Oh, you lost." Oh, I'm glad you're back then. I saw someone said, "Ooh, snips, nice." I have nicer shears coming in, but how about some scissor snips with what I've got right now? And you can tell me if they are bad or not. I'm going to pick random ones. I haven't done the bracelet yet. I could probably go to a salon as well. Yes, thank you for joining, Wild Dragon. Another time. I did say at the very start of my stream, my name is Raven, but I say Obsidian Reeds is here, and this is Emerald Lake. Hopefully I will sort out my tech and you will be able to see me soon. Alright. And now I have my bracelet that I am going to do a little bit with. And that was some with the bracelet. Since most of you here are from Violet, it might be interesting for you to know that I am still learning what I'm doing and I'm working with a microphone from Violet. So thank you, Violet. And I'm probably going to continue to get help from her. I think I will do some dice rolls and then I'll move on to Red Riding Hood. night, everyone that's going to bed. Ooh, my knuckle cracked. Thank you for the nice compliments. I'm going to move on to my next and final story, The Little Red Riding Hood. The website that I've been getting these off of has a tendency to cut out some, and looking at Little Red Riding Hood, it is so much shorter than all of the rest have been. I'm not sure why. Meanwhile, the little Ugly Duckling was so much longer than I had expected. So, this is an interesting gamble with them. Oh no, Violet, you burnt your toast. Oh no. Unfortunate. Alright. Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who was called Little Red Riding Hood because she was quite small and because she always wore a red cloak with a big red hood to it, which her grandmother had made for her. Now one day her mother, who had been churning and baking cakes, said to her, "My dear, put on your red cloak with a hood to it, and take this cake and this pot of butter to your granny, and ask how she is, for I hear she is ailing." Now Little Red Riding Hood was very fond of her grandmother, who made her so many nice things, so she put on her cloak joyfully and started on her errand. But her grandmother lived some way off, and to reach the cottage, Little Red Riding Hood had to pass through a vast, lonely forest. However, some woodcutters were at work in it, so Little Red Riding Hood was not so very much alarmed when she saw a great big wolf coming towards her, because she knew that wolves were cowardly things. And sure enough, the wolf, though but for the woodcutters he would surely have eaten Little Red Riding Hood, only stopped and asked her politely where she was going. "I'm going to see Granny. Take her this cake and this pot of butter and ask how she is," says Little Red Riding Hood. "Does she live a very long way off?" asked the wolf craftily. "Not so very far if you go by the straight road," replied Little Red Riding Hood. "You only have to pass the mill, and the first cottage on the right is Granny's. But I am going by the wood path because there are such a lot of nuts and flowers and butterflies." "I wish you good luck," says the wolf politely. "Give my respects to your grandmother, and tell her I hope she is quite well." And with that he trotted off, but instead of going his ways, he turned back, took the straight road to the old woman's cottage, and knocked at the door. Rap, rap, rap. "Who's there?" asked the old woman, who was in bed. "Little Red Riding Hood," sings out the wolf, making his voice as shrill as he could. "I've come to bring dear Granny a pot of butter and a cake from Mother, and ask how you are." "Pull the bobbin and the latch will go up," says the old woman, well satisfied. So the wolf pulled the bobbin and the latch went up, and oh my, it wasn't a minute before he had gobbled up old Granny, for he had had nothing to eat for a week. Then he shut the door, put on Granny's nightcap, and, getting into bed, rolled himself well up in the clothes. By and by along comes Little Red Riding Hood, who had been amusing herself by gathering nuts, running after butterflies, and picking flowers. So she knocked at the door. Rap, rap, rap. "Who's there?" says the wolf, making his voice as soft as he could. Now, Little Red Riding Hood heard the voice was very gruff, but she thought her grandmother had a cold, so she said, Little Red Riding Hood, with a pot of butter and a cake for Mother, to ask how you are. Pull the bobbin and the latch will go up. So Little Red Riding Hood pulled the bobbin, the latch went up, and there, she thought, was her grandmother in bed, for the cottage was so dark one could not see well. Besides, the crafty wolf turned his face to the wall at first, and he made his voice soft as he could, when he said, "Come and kiss me, my dear." Then Little Red Riding Hood took off her cloak and went to bed. "Oh, Grandmamma, Grandmamma," says she, "what big arms you've got." "All the better to hug you with," says he. "But, Grandmamma, Grandmamma, what big ears you've got." "All the better to hear you with, my dear." "But, Grandmamma, Grandmamma, what big legs you have." "All the better to run with, my dear." "But, Grandmamma, Grandmamma, what big eyes you've got." "All the better to see you with, my dear." "Oh, Grandmamma, Grandmamma, what big teeth you've got." "All the better to eat you with, my dear," says that wicked, wicked wolf. And with that, he gobbled up Little Red Riding Hood. And somehow that is the end of their version of Little Red Riding Hood, even though they directly mention all of the woodsmen. Oh well, no happy ending this time. With that, I will be wrapping up. I was expecting to go longer. Like I said, it was very short. So, all of you lovely new people, how about you put in the chat if you would like more triggers, more story, or to be released to go to bed? Because I know many of you have been listening to Vi for a while. If I were to read another story, which one would I pick? That one is far too long. I would never be done. Ooh, some humming. Yes, I will do some humming. Yes, it looked like the two of you were entirely in sync. I'll do another short hum, because there was two of you. Oh, these little things. I very much like your little rats with flowers. They are so cute. Humming is so nice. Should I go again with the first one? We love humming. Okay, if you live humming. The bidet rats are certainly something. I will say that much. Oh wow, you've got so many people that have flowers. They are so nice. I think I will pick one more song to hum. Everybody's spinning. That is a very fun one. All right. Any other requests? I don't think I'm going to be a murderous Psyduck, but thank you, Death Nora. I don't have anything in my sound bank for that. Glass jar, okay. Totos. Hi, Totos. And Snake. Thank you, Velgor. I see you have little pat pat. I appreciate you for the little pat pats. Yes, all of the good that I'm doing you can thank Violet for. She has taught me all of the ways that she can teach me. And she will be helping more, I'm sure. I'm not sure how loud this one is. Tell me if you can hear the brushes. Yay! Oh. Oh, do you have advice for me now, Violet? Tell me. Oh, you gave, not have you get. Yes, you did. You have been very helpful. And I'm glad you could hear the brushes. It is hard for me to tell. Nope. You're all ready to hear Violet's advice as well. You have to join the very secret magic streaming advice club in the forest. Really, you just have to know that bunny. Once you know that bunny, you're in. You know the bunny I mean, right? Well, thank you. Good night, Death Noah. This is the stress toy squish. Not that anyone asked, I just felt like squishing it. Yes, I said bunny. You know, the bunnies you know. I always forget their names. The big ones. They're quite formidable rabbits. That whole freaking clan. They stomp around this forest like they own it, and they're not exactly wrong. Big Buck Bunny Skrunkle. Yes, that is his name. I forget the Skrunkles. Big Chungus bunnies. Absolutely, that's them. They are quite the thing to behold. Alright. Perhaps this one will be short. Oh, I have a very, very short story. Maybe that is the best one to go out with. The Princess and the Pea. Yes, I think that will be it. And then I will wrap up this stream by 10 minutes from now-ish. Thank you, all of you, for joining. If you have a request for a trigger before I end, again, this is a very short story, so I'm sure that I will read it and have time to do those, and then end for the night. But here goes. The Princess and the Pea. There was once a prince who wanted to marry a princess. But she must be a real princess, mind you. So he traveled all around the world, seeking such a one, but everywhere something was in the way. Not that there was any lack of princesses, but he could not seem to make out whether they were real princesses. There was always something not quite satisfactory. Therefore he came again, quite out of spirits, for he wished so much to marry a real princess. One evening a terrible storm came on. It thundered and lightened, and rain poured down. Indeed, it was quite fearful. In the midst of it there came a knock at the town gate, and the old king went out to open it. It was a princess who stood outside, but oh dear, what a state she was in from the rain and bad weather. The water dropped from her hair and clothes. It ran in at the tips of her shoes and out at the heels, yet she insisted she was a real princess. Very well, thought the old queen, that we shall presently see. She said nothing, but went into the bedchamber and took off all the bedding, then laid a pea on the stacking of the bedstead. Having done this, she took 20 mattresses and laid them upon the pea, and placed 20 eider-down beds on top of the mattresses. The princess lay upon this bed all the night. In the morning she was asked how she had slept. "Oh, most miserably," she said. "I scarcely closed my eyes the whole night through. I cannot think what there could have been in my bed. I lay upon something so hard that I am quite black and blue all over. It is dreadful." It was quite evident that she was a real princess, since through 20 mattresses and 20 eider-down beds she had felt the pea. None but a real princess could have such delicate feeling. So the prince took her for his wife, for he knew that in her he had found a true princess. And the pea was preserved in the cabinet of curiosities, where it is still to be seen unless someone has stolen it. And this, mind you, is a real story. That is the literal last sentence of this. I can't imagine it is, but maybe it is. I cannot imagine if I had done that to a friend. Oh, I need to see if my friend is really properly posh. I'm going to put a pea under just way too many mattresses and beds. You can sleep just as well on a bed of peas as you could a bed with one pea, I think. I'm going to wrap up for the night then, if none of you have any other requests. And this will be it. And everyone that is sleepy can go and finally sleep. Thank you, friends. Good night. Alright, I'm going to end the stream. Thank you again, everyone, for joining, and for all of the new followers. I'm going to be streaming twice a day for some of the week. I'll be updating my schedule either in the morning or in a little while.